Scavengers Reign is an American adult animated science fiction drama television series created by Joseph Bennett and Charles Huettner for HBO Max. It is a show about a stranded and separated space crew that are subjugated to the beautiful, yet dangerously lethal conditions and wildlife on planet Vesta, which is the planet they have been stranded on. With potentially deadly scenarios at every turn, will these stranded space explorers survive long enough to succeed in finding a way back home, or will they fail in their endeavors and ultimately realize that life on Vesta is a fate they can't escape? But most importantly, is this show even interesting or worth watching? All of these questions and more will be answered in today's episode of Medianalysis. There will be massive spoilers, by the way, if that wasn't obvious already. The show starts off with the news that all but one of the spaceships in a fleet have been accounted for by these two crew members responsible for keeping track of the ships, and that the missing ship had changed its course before mysteriously disappearing.
Damn. That's unfortunate.
Honestly, I'd probably respond the exact same way. These people are on a planet where climbing into a not hippo and tearing out its insides turns them into flashlights. Okay, sure. The next day, this woman, named Ursula, marks the wall, indicating how many days she has been there, before stepping outside and cutting open a knot durian to make green rope. It turns out that the rope is a wire that is for this man's device that was designed to land their floating spaceship down near them. It doesn't happen. The organic wire shorts the battery and breaks the machine that this man, now revealed to be Sam, had built. Ursula then tells Sam that their only option is to get the battery from pod number 5, which will be a voyage that takes them at least a 2 days round trip. In a different pod, a man had been going crazy due to not having a way to escape his pod due to the tangled vines, but we'll get back to that later. We then see this woman putting up a fence around her own setup, and it's reaffirmed that the organic life on this strange planet is able to complement things like circuitry, robotics, and other electrical mechanisms. After learning that her name is Ozzy, she leaves on her bike to scare away these tall, lumbering creatures, but she misses one of them and the robot sets off a seismic wave flare to startle it, before Ozzy stabs a land jellyfish and wipes its pheromones along the perimeter of her campsite as a natural repellent for the same lumbering creatures he scared off with the sound tactics. Later that night, a few of these amphibious creatures are shown using a strange light on some three-legged animals when one of them notices Cayman's pod and goes towards it before hitting him with the same swirling light ability that causes him to imagine a ball made of faces. Ozzy sends out a distress message on her radio, but there is no answer. Speaking of distress, the large creatures that Ozzy warded off earlier have come back and break into her garden before attacking her robot named Levi. And once she sees this, she heads out to investigate. Sam and Ursula, from the beginning, are using these creatures that they scraped off the bottom of a rock as respirator masks while traversing through an underground cave system. It turns out that the 5th pod they were looking for was inside this cave system, and once they get there, they head inside, grab the battery before exiting the pod and start heading back. However, they don't even make it 20 feet away from the pod before they hear a noise that sounds like another human in agony. Ursula is caught off guard by this and the fungus creature that begins to stir to life beneath her, and as a result, she trips and falls, kicking the fungus that mimics human noises and causes it to expand and explode in a cloud of gas. However, this gas proves to be difficult for Ursula as her facehugger mask begins to fall off. Sam warns her to hold her breath as they make a hasty escape from the cave, but Ursula can't keep from coughing, and while Sam is able to get out unscathed, Ursula will not be as fortunate. Her coughing caused her to inhale the fungus, and now it has taken over her body. Wait. Never mind, she's fine. Ozzy has tracked down the creatures that took her robot and tries to fight them, but is unable to save herself without using her last seismic flare to scare them off. Levi then tells Ozzy that since most of their crops had been destroyed and that they are running out of food, they will need to relocate. The manic man named Cayman stops hallucinating after the light is taken away from him, but he wants to go back to that place he was in, and he is upset once it's over. But to his surprise, the creature that showed him the light leaps toward him before breaking into his pod and begins to observe him. However, Cayman, who has never been able to leave his pod due to the obstructions around it, leaps at the opportunity to get out. while subsequently leaping to what was almost his death right before the nuke frog thing saves him from falling and shows him the swirling light once more, while feeding him a dark substance from its mouth. The creature then leads Cayman to follow it into the forest. Sam and Ursula are able to finally get the machine to work, and the ship that was once stranded in outer space is now stranded on this uncharted planet. The ship that was once drifting in space has landed, and these weird yellow things come to poke at it, but hastily leave once they hear a strange sound. That sound turns out to be the ship's siren, which these two are also able to hear. So, Sam and Ursula need to get to the ship before any of the dangerous wildlife on this strange planet gets there before them. While this is happening, Ozzy is reminiscing on a time before she and the rest of the crew were separated as she reads a book that a friend of hers named Mia gave her. She calls upon her robot companion, Levi, and says that they need to leave before creating a makeshift calling horn for this creature that then proceeds to knock her stuff down as it flies off. A heavy windstorm picks up in the area, making their situation all the more extreme. Cayman seems to be following this woman into the forest, but is actually being led by the telekinetic newt that showed him the light earlier, and he is hallucinating that he is following someone else, when in reality, he is not. After falling into a puddle, we then learn that the newt frog wants Cayman to follow it and go into the cave. I'm sure that they will tell us what these things actually are later on, but for now, they are just newt frogs. Speaking of caves, Ursula and Sam proceed on their journey closer to the location of where the ship crashed, but is also closer to the windstorm that Ozzy is dealing with. Because of the debris that is both sharp and fast, the two decide to head to a cave nearby to take shelter from the high-speed winds. However, instead of going to the cave, Ursula gets the idea to ride out the storm inside the body of a large fish creature, an idea that Sam protests against until he caves in, pun intended, and follows her. And honestly, after the number of things that these people subject themselves to on the daily just to stay alive, it's kinda silly that Sam would object to her idea, but whatever. Cayman heads inside a different cave where the rest of these newt frogs live, and the hallucination invites him to sleep next to her, so naturally, he does. Ozzy takes refuge inside a pillar in order to take shelter from the windstorm, but in doing so, she finds what seems like an oasis that Levi the robot had scoped out during the nights in which Ozzy would usually be sleeping. Despite Ursula's initial speculation of safety, danger still finds its way inside of these upside-down jellyfish, as these cockroach krill-like creatures descend into the egg sacs and start eating the eggs. But when one of them gets into Sam and Ursula's egg sac, it immediately goes for a direct physical assault on Sam. However, after Sam stabs it with a knife, that does nothing by the way, the krill roach releases a sonic shriek that damages Sam's earbuds and incapacitates them both. Ursula manages to get up as soon as she sees Sam being drained, and it seems that this creature has the same weakness as a turtle, being flipped on its back. After killing the krill roach, Sam suggests to Ursula that it's time to leave. Cayman continues to follow the newt frog before he remembers how he couldn't start a fire while on vacation, and, in a fit of rage, this causes him to try to escape from the hole he's in, and Cayman does manage to get out, but quickly regrets his decision once he sees the raging windstorm outside. He falls into the abyss, but just like the last time he fell, the newt frog is there to catch him and reel him in with its telekinetic abilities. Ozzy asks Levi why it has been spending so much time with the various projects it has been developing in the Oasis, and when Levi tells Ozzy that it doesn't know why, but just feels compelled to, that is a tad concerning to Ozzy, and asks if they can leave. Levi then explains that the storm is past, and that now it's safe to leave, so they exit the Oasis and go back to their pod house. But once they step outside, they see that the rough winds have completely destroyed their pod house, so Ozzy makes the executive decision to grab everything that is useful and head to the Demeter, the name of their ship that just landed on the planet not too long ago. Sam and Ursula are regurgitated out of the upside-down jellyfish after some time and set up camp for the night. The next day, Sam and Ursula are on the move again, and Sam tells Ursula about a previous mission he was on. when he and a friend of his were on a barren planet with no life whatsoever, but turned around and found a skull that had not been there before. Exactly 1 year later after finding that skull, that friend died. After this, Ursula and Sam then come across a thick hedge made of bones that seems too narrow for them to get through, but they know there must be a way because the wild dog creatures they saw earlier were able to get through just fine, based on the track prints they found on the ground. Ursula picks up a shell or a fossil, it's not really clear and also doesn't matter, before bringing it to the wall where it reacts with an electric spark and opens up a path for them to go through. While this is happening, the newt frog is observing Cayman trying to grab fruit from a tree, but the branch breaks and Cayman almost falls to his death for the third time so far. And once again, the newt frog uses its telekinetic powers to stop him from dying. The bone wall starts to close in on Sam and Ursula, so they start to run in order to get out before it fully closes on them. But Ursula sees something glowing and goes to investigate it. So it turns out that this glowing flower thing was housing one of those newt frogs, but the frog was too weak and it died. When Ursula tells Sam about this, he brushes it off as nothing more than a waste of time and that they need to get out of the cave that they are in. After Ozzy asks Levi why it stopped to stare at knot ants instead of helping her with packing up their stuff, Ozzy and Levi ride around a bit before Ozzy stops for more water, but her hydration break is cut short when Levi tells her that there is a stampede of red-bellied horse dogs, yeah sure that's the name, headed their way. Levi and Ozzy then proceed to use the Doppler effect to survive the stampede, so, there's that too, which is kind of interesting in itself. Cayman, still under the influence of the newt frog, is throwing rocks at every creature in the trees and bringing the carcasses back to the newt frog so that it can eat them before the newt frog feeds him the same black slime from earlier and his eyes begin to glow. The newt frog then proceeds to make Cayman kill an even bigger newt frog so that it can proceed to eat it. Sam and Ursula argue about whether or not they should be solely focusing on getting to the ship, or have the main focus be getting to the ship, with a side focus of learning more about this strange planet and its strange creatures. After which, Sam accidentally steps on and breaks a strange fruit, before getting picked up by a strange creature that carries him off into a strange hole in a strange tree. Ursula heads into the strange tree to find Sam, but quickly realizes that it's impossible to climb the inside or outside of the tree, so she needs to try to get sucked up like the last creature was. Ursula then smears some of that same fruit on her and allows herself to be taken up the tree, where she finds out that the creatures that bring their victims up here are put in a biological heat circle and cooked to death. Not wanting to die, she makes the smart choice of getting out of there immediately, and shortly after finds Sam mourning the death of his friends inside the wreckage of a different ship. After laying his deceased friends to rest, Sam tells Ursula that he is grateful for having someone like her with her instincts, as they themselves could have ended up like his friends if it weren't for her questioning attitude. Levi has a hallucination inside of a dream and wakes up to see Ozzy using her radio to transmit another message to anyone who might be listening, yet again to no avail. So, she decides to get a haircut from Levi, and then proceeds to return the favor by checking the circuitry inside of Levi for maintenance, but becomes concerned when she sees even more of the organic life intertwined within her mechanical companion's circuitry than before. The organic matter meshed with Levi's electronics is causing Levi to feel things a robot shouldn't be able to feel, like pain and anxiety. So Ozzy shuts Levi down to see what she can do about it. While she is in the process of this, floating balls of moss attach themselves to Ozzy and paralyze her, requiring her to reactivate Levi before her maintenance is completed in order to save her from the needle-beaked fluff lizard. Yeah, sure, that's the name we'll go with. Levi tells Ozzy that it didn't like being turned off unexpectedly, and makes Ozzy promise not to turn Levi off again unless it's absolutely necessary, because it wants to experience the world around it. Cayman continues his killing spree for the newt frog, which is growing bigger and bigger with each carcass that it eats. It's now even bigger than Cayman, who is sharpening a wooden spear, preparing for his next kill, and that kill is against a crocodinosaur. Yeah, sure, that's the name. But while fighting the crocodino, it's revealed on a flashback that Cayman is the one who changed the course of the Demeter behind Sam's back, who was apparently the captain of the crew or something, causing them to be redirected into the solar flare that got their ship stranded in outer space in the first place. Ozzy has a severe rash due to the residual fibers that the fuzzy balls left on her, and stumbles upon an area where there are fish that eat the damaged and infected skin, helping Ozzy to become rid of her rash. After she's done, she and Levi head out on her bike. So, apparently before, most people who were awake in their pods got eaten or killed by the storm. This guy managed to escape the wreckage of the Demeter and wandered off on his own. And, unsurprisingly, every single thing that he encounters tries to kill him, until he runs into Cayman. Turns out his name is Charlie, and he tells Cayman that there are still people on the Demeter, that they should head over there and help them out. But, before they can do that, the newt frog runs up to them and uses its telekinetic abilities to lift Charlie up in the air and twists his neck all the way around, killing him instantly. Where he was never seen again, what a way to go. Why the newt frog opted for that route instead of just doing whatever it was already doing to Cayman is beyond me. After witnessing this and remembering how he left his wife on the ship to die while he ran away like a coward, Cayman has an emotional breakdown and begs the newt frog for help, so it stands up on its tail before completely absorbing Cayman.
Fuck Cayman.
Speaking of Cayman, Sam is going on a rant about how he hates Cayman, hoping he gets everything that's coming to him for altering their course and being the reason they are all stranded on planet Vesta. Sam gets stung by a tentacle plant, and after a few hours, it causes him to feel fatigue. Ursula is concerned for him, but Sam insists that they will be fine if they keep going. Unbeknownst to them, the plant is growing what looks like another human inside of it. Ozzy's bike breaks down due to a knot bat chewing through the wires, and as a result, they have to continue their arduous journey on foot. After a few kilometers of walking, the two of them come across a gorge and need to figure out a way to cross it in order to proceed to their destination. Levi and Ozzy decide to use a cable and hook from the bike to make it across the chasm, but as they are crossing, the newt frog chases them to the other side and uses its telekinetic abilities to destroy Levi. In a fit of rage, Ozzy attacks the newt frog but is easily launched over the side of the chasm, but she grabs onto a rope that is instantly cut, so it didn't help at all. Ozzy sends out a desperate plea for help on her radio one last time. So it turns out that the thing inside of the plant isn't actually a human. Well, kinda. It's a creature that's designed to look like whatever the source of the blood sample was from. Once the original dies, the new lookalike will take its place and then explode afterwards. This causes a new group of those tentacle plants to grow where the exploded blood of the copy was spilled. I'm not gonna lie, I have a few issues with the way that this plant functions, and I think it's pretty stupid, but I'll explain that in the story and plot segment of the video. Once night falls, Sam becomes incapacitated and Ursula makes the choice to camp out for the night. And when Ursula starts seeing strange things in the forest, she realizes that something is terribly wrong. The imitation, yeah sure that's what we'll call it, has buried Sam alive, and Ursula wakes up just in time to save him. However, the only way to beat the imitation was to burn it to a crisp, which causes their campsite and resources and supplies to catch on fire and go up in flames in the process. Sam eventually realizes that he can't keep going and decides to sit down so that he can die in peace. But a new woman has arrived right after Sam resigns himself to his fate. Now that Ozzy is on her own, she has to navigate her way through the ever-dangerous lands of Vesta without any aid. Or so she thought. It turns out that Ozzy's last distress call actually went through and reached a few people mining oil on the moon or something. They soon land on the planet where they breathe on each other very hard to decide who will be the leader before preparing to go find Ozzy. After finding her, they tell Ozzy that they aren't actually interested in rescuing her, but just want to take the cargo and gear from her ship, the Demeter, and maybe they will get her off the planet if they feel like it, but will need to hash out the details on the way back to their own ship. Little do they know, the newt frog has already damaged their ship and destroyed it beyond repair. Ursula and the mystery woman take Sam to her house, and after setting him on the table, she inspects his infected arm and puts not alcohol on his arm, but it isn't enough, so they need to go get more. Once they do get more, the woman starts treating Sam while Ursula looks around her home. Later that night, Sam wakes up and also decides to poke around the strange woman's home, where he discovers a literal monster in her closet and wakes up Ursula so that way they can get out of her house. After assessing the damage to their destroyed ship, the mining team and Ozzy are headed to the remains of the Demeter on foot. While on their journey, Barry, the young boy, starts messing with the wildlife and gets shot by a needle plant. Clearly unable to learn his lesson, Barry messes with an acid-spitting sky ray, yeah sure that's the name, and as a result, his buddy dies in what is undoubtedly the most unfair death in this show so far. Usually when someone dies, whether it be on screen or they disappear off screen, I'll say my usual, and we're never seen again, what a way to go. But doing that here would honestly be disrespectful. That's how unfair this death was. Sam and Ursula are roaming through a field, but while Sam feels better than ever, Ursula is now the one feeling fatigued and needing to rest. While Ursula is sleeping, Sam is off cliff diving, making mud piles, skipping living stones, and gathering these glowing urchin balls. When Ursula rightfully asks him what he's doing, Sam tells her that he just wants to spend another night here before they head to the shuttle. Eventually, Ursula confronts Sam about his weird behavior, and it turns out that Sam has a parasite inside of his body that was controlling his actions and his heart. Since they can't do anything about the parasite inside Sam yet, Ursula and Sam decide to head towards the ship still, and hope that the medical supplies and technology will be of use to them. As they continue to traverse, Ursula and Sam come across a riverbank with the shells of giant insect larvae, and they use one of the molts as a boat. The boat is moving more rapidly than expected due to the current, and eventually it capsizes, causing Sam and Ursula to fall into the water, and Ursula gets attacked by a rabid sea monkey. Yeah, sure, that's what we'll call it. And Sam saves her from drowning before attempting to infect her with the same parasite that he has. Fortunately for her, she wakes up just in time before he is able to. Team Ozzy, as I shall refer to them for the remainder of this segment, come across a mountain, and Chris, the leader, teaches Ozzy how they climb mountains. As they climb the mountain, Ozzy gets attacked by some bug birds. Yeah, sure, that's what we'll call them. And after getting away from the bug birds, Chris dangles Ozzy over a cliff in order to teach Ozzy a lesson about conquering her fears before setting up camp on one of the pillars. Levi's parts have washed up along the shore, and now several small creatures are working together to make Levi whole again. Sam and Ursula are riding on the top of a giant creature, while Sam is fighting his urge to put his parasite eggs in the bodies of other living things. Once they realize that the creature is no longer headed the way they need to go, they get off of it, and Sam tells Ursula that if he tries to put an egg/seed, whatever, in her body, to stab him. They then make their way to a giant tree and stop to rest there for a bit, but from their vantage point, they are able to see the Demeter, marking the final stretch in their journey home. A journey that Sam, once again, says he can no longer be a part of, due to the parasite taking over him. As Ursula leaves for the Demeter, Sam rips out the parasite attached to his heart and bleeds out underneath the tree. Where he was never seen again, what a way to go. Team Ozzy crosses a river with several large rocks, but during this, Ozzy and Chris have an argument about if Chris is really going to wake up the crew from cryo-sleep, or if that was just a lie. The argument escalates until Ozzy knocks Chris into the shallow water before Ozzy gets knocked out by Barry. Once she comes to, she finds herself tied up and abandoned in the empty riverbed. And what's more is that the Hollow, they never said its name so I googled it, has reached the Demeter before anyone else was able to. Team Ozzy, without Ozzy, manages to make it to the Demeter, and are now searching for any useful cargo they can find and use for their own mining colony. The Hollow finds the dead body of Cayman's wife and lays next to it, inducing a dream for Cayman inside of it that torments him mentally. Ursula is on her way to the Demeter, but stops when she sees a revived Levi and tries to ask for its help, But Levi tells her that her time is short in a very cryptic way, and also that Levi isn't broken, but it's better than ever. Ozzy, still tied up at the bottom of the empty riverbed, is unable to free herself, and she screams in anger and agony, a scream that Ursula hears and rushes over to Ozzy's rescue. The Hollow attacks Chris and Barry while they attempt to load the cargo and steal it. Realizing his abilities are more than they can handle, they escape through the ventilation shaft and try to come up with a plan, as Ursula and Ozzy finally arrive at the Demeter. With Ozzy and Ursula working together, Ursula is able to begin the reanimation process of awakening the crew, while Ozzy confronts Chris about trying to leave the crew and herself for dead. However, she isn't actually able to wake anyone up due to the Hollow appearing and breaking the wires, causing the wake-up systems to go offline as warning signals blare throughout the room. After a change of heart, Barry joins Ozzy as they work together to try to stop the Hollow and wake up the crew manually. Chris, however, is preparing to leave Barry and the rest of them to die on the planet. Ozzy is able to draw the Hollow outside of the ship before proceeding to lose a fight to this monkey frog and watching helplessly as Chris escapes in the emergency shuttle that Ozzy was hoping to use for the crew. When all hope is lost, Levi comes to save Ozzy, and by accidentally shocking the Hollow, Levi wins, I think. They wake up the crew in the non-damaged pods, and by some miracle, Ozzy's friends with sexual tension attached is one of the people who didn't die. Good for her, I guess. The final scene is Ozzy, Ursula, and Cayman making a new life for themselves on Vesta, and Levi is growing little Levi's out of that flower that shows up every time somebody dies. And that's it. That's Scavengers Reign. Alright, so this show was definitely something that was an interesting watch, and while there are absolutely some things I want to discuss overall, first we need to start with this show's characters. I liked the majority of the characters in the show, with a few I felt we could do without. But all in all, there was almost never a boring character on screen, and they each brought something interesting to the table that made this show as interesting as it was. Each separate team with their own dynamics and arcs that were similar to each other yet different. We had Sam and Ursula, a team comprised of two humans, with one of them trying to understand their surroundings and environment better, while the other one just wanting to get off the planet and leave. Ozzy and Levi, a team of a human and a robot, with one of them trying to understand the surroundings and environment better, leading to becoming one with the planet, while the other one just wants to get off the planet and leave. And then we have Cayman and the Hollow, a team of a human and a native creature to planet Vesta, which I will get into later as to how their dynamic functions. In the case of Ozzy and Levi, it begins with Ozzy viewing and treating Levi as a subordinate, and a being that is less than, whose opinions are not as important due to Levi being an expendable robot that can be replaced at her convenience. Hell, in her very first scene, Ozzy even says that as soon as she gets back to civilization, that she would trade Levi in for a better bike with no hesitation whatsoever. But as the organic life of the planet begins to merge with Levi more and more over the course of the series, Ozzy's opinion of Levi shifts, as does her own attitude, no longer ordering Levi around, but acknowledging as Levi is their own person, with their own feelings, will, and desire. With Sam and Ursula, I enjoyed how it was almost like a passing of the torch, how through the way Ursula interacted with the things she came into contact with contrasted in the way that Sam did, and through his eventual death, gave her all the tools that she would need to finish what he set out to do. And let's talk about Sam's death for a moment, because although this may sound bad, I was pretty much waiting for this guy to die ever since the Wall of Bone episode. This man has pretty much had so many close calls with death that it was literally only a matter of time before he finally kicked the bucket. To give you an idea of where I'm coming from, in chronological order, Sam has been on several dangerous space missions before the show even started, been hit by a solar flare while aboard his ship, crash-landed and marooned on an alien planet for over a month, if those tally marks are accurate and to be believed, been beaten and stabbed repeatedly by a lobster roach before being exposed to a sound so loud and painful that it caused his eardrums to rupture and his body to collapse, somehow survived being picked up by those weird solar cooker creatures, survived getting tentacle poisoned only to be attacked by a parasite and buried alive, survived being buried alive only to start to die via infection, infected and attacked by yet another parasite, and it ends with him needing to basically rip out his own heart as he dies alone under a tree. After all that, I wasn't even sad when he died. I was just relieved that he didn't need to deal with this anymore, because he's been through more than enough already. Which brings me to one of my biggest issues with the characters. If you aren't a girl in this show, you're basically doomed to a terrible fate. Don't believe me? Let's take a head count of every male character that set foot on this planet. Sam, abused by the planet until he died. Kamen gets his pod trapped in a chasm at the start of the show, and the only way he is able to leave that pod is after the Hollow starts messing with him in his mind. And once the Hollow gets in his head, he is basically a meat puppet for the remainder of the show. Charlie, the only person to make it out of the Demeter without getting eaten, wanders around for days without food or water before immediately getting his neck snapped by the Hollow. Possessed woman's husband gets controlled and died due to his wife stabbing him, yet she was able to live on for several years just fine apparently, despite having the same condition as her husband and Sam, which is the parasite being in her body. Terrence, instantly killed by a plant. That was just unfair. I'm not even going to go any further than that. Barry, forced to watch his leader kill his best friend before the same leader leaves him for dead and abandons him on a planet with a raging monster on the loose. Being a male character is not a fun time on planet Vesta. I never once felt like Ursula's life was in danger in this show. The only time that comes to mind is literally the first episode when she inhales the fungus dust and it looks like her body's being turned into a fungus, but no, that was just a hallucination or something. It's never explained, and I'm also kind of upset about that too, because she is totally fine for the rest of the show compared to Sam. A rock cuts her hand and starts growing sediment on her body during the windstorm episode. Nope, forget about it. Literally never brought up again. The tentacle plant is about to jab Ursula and infect her with a parasite. Just kidding. Sam can take the hit this time. Again, Ursula hurts her leg and she has a limp. I think they mentioned that all of 3 times and then it just never talked about again because she's moving around just fine. Perhaps the worst offender of this is Ozzy, where Sam starts out fine and suddenly ends up in life-threatening situations. Ozzy is the exact opposite, where she starts off in a life-threatening situation and suddenly ends up just fine. The biggest example I can point to is when she fights the Hollow for the first time. Up to this point, the Hollow has instantly killed or destroyed everything it came across that it doesn't already have under its control with zero hesitation. Yet, for some reason, Ozzy survives not 1, but 2 violent encounters with the Hollow. To make this even more glaring, the Hollow quite literally shatters Levi without a second thought the first time Levi and Ozzy come across the Hollow. But instead of giving Ozzy the Charlie treatment, or even the Levi treatment, the Hollow entertains a fight with Ozzy. A fight which Ozzy had no right to survive whatsoever, yet somehow does just that. During the final confrontation, the Hollow uses its powers to lift Ozzy up in the air, and that's it. Keep in mind that right before this happened, the Hollow was able to redirect bombs, destroy computers, and also smash people with crates using just its mind. It was throwing large crates at its enemies, destroyed the minor spaceship with nothing more than its psychic abilities. So the fact that Ozzy managed to make it out alive twice just rubs me the wrong way, because I don't like when characters are written to be inconsistent, but only when the plot requires it. Ozzy even manages to get her happily ever after with Mia, who just so happens to be alive and well. And it's not that I hate Ozzy, because I actually enjoy her almost as much as I enjoy Sam, but I just hate the situations Ozzy finds herself in compared to everyone else. When the biggest threat to your life that you have encountered on your journey was actual sentient lint balls, maybe your dangers aren't all that impressive. During the windstorm, Ozzy hides out inside an actual oasis, and that is by far the safest location on this planet. She could have just stayed there for the rest of the show, and honestly, not much would have changed. But it's the fact that she's always ending up relatively unscathed that bothers me. Ozzy even gets knocked out, tied up, and left for dead at the side of the river. And I refuse to believe that not a single creature, plant or fungus, attacked her while she was utterly defenseless, given how the mentality of everything on this planet is very much kill first, ask questions never. Kamen spends the majority of the show being a meat puppet. And the most significant thing about his character is probably that he was the reason that everyone got stranded on Vesta in the first place, because he cared more about his job than the safety of the crew. Yet I guess it never once crossed his mind that he is part of the crew, and if the crew dies, more than likely, so will he. I'm sure that his flashbacks with his wife, telling him how unhappy she was in their marriage, were interesting to someone, but I simply couldn't find myself to care because he's just a selfish man-child that very much deserves what happened to him, and then some. Well, on the topic of unimportant characters, let's talk about the space miners. The bandit trio of Chris, Terrence, and Barry. Almost everything about these three frustrates me. Chris's attitude, Barry's naivete, and just the way Terrence died in the most unfair way in the entire show. Everything involving Chris was non-entertaining to me, and just made me wish someone would get her off my screen. Final straw for me was when she was dangling Ozzy over a cliff and told her to let go of her fears and become selfish just like Chris. What's worse is when you realize that they were completely irrelevant to the story as a whole, and could have been easily written out, with not much changing if anything, which I will circle back to in a later segment of the video. But for this, I would say the characters get a 3.75 out of 5. Story and plot. What is the plot of Scavengers Reign? Maroon space travelers are stranded on a planet and need to get home. It's a simple enough premise, and I also enjoy the fact that it takes place from 3 different points of reference throughout the entire show, showcasing how, even though everyone started at somewhere different than the other, the final destination was still essentially the same, that the end goal for each of them was still the same. Sometimes you don't gotta reinvent the wheel for a decent enough story, and that logic applies here to this show for sure. While some of my minor issues boil down to a lot of they survived the shenanigans, I feel like I've already talked enough about it in the previous segment of the video. But what I do think is interesting is how the planet interacts with inorganic or inanimate objects like metals, rocks, wires, and circuits. It seems like electricity, whether it be conducting, transmuting, emitting, or transforming, is a key part of the biochemical makeup of the creatures on this planet, to the point where living creatures and tools are basically interchangeable. What I don't understand is exactly why it is the way that it is. Of course, the simple answer is because the show wanted it to be like that, but I just feel like there has to be more than that. It's definitely interesting, but there is no real explanation, and we are kind of forced to just take it at face value and accept that it's just a thing they can do. Ironically enough, Levi's arc was perhaps a bit more inorganic than people realize, despite the entire reason for Levi's change in behavior being due to organic material. And I say that because it's not really Levi undergoing some internal change that makes it appreciate what it truly means to be alive. It's actually quite comparable to when Sam had that heart parasite that was slowly taking over his body. The change didn't occur because Levi got a better understanding of life due to an internal discovery, but because planetary fungi was slowly taking over Levi due to the fact that life on this planet is compatible with electronic structures. That's not to say I didn't understand the symbolism behind Levi's metamorphosis, but the reality is that this only happens because Levi got infected and refused to get rid of said infection once the virus started taking hold of Levi. I know I said I would mention why I thought the tentacle plant was stupid, and here's what I have to say. Okay, so the tentacle plant, right? It works like this. It takes a sample of your blood, it grows and creates another you, with the same clothes that you're wearing, somehow. The imitation then must go out of its way to find you, kill you, bury you, take your place among whatever herd or crowd you belong to, and then explode, killing everyone else in your herd due to acidic blood or something. Then it grows more of those useless tentacle plants in the same area, and the cycle repeats. I'm sorry, but that just seems a bit unnecessary. Wouldn't making the parasite grow inside of the host and then the host just explode be enough? You can cut out a lot of the middlemen that way too. It just seems like a lot more energy for the plant itself than it's worth to do the whole pseudo-cloning gimmick. What if the creature in question doesn't have a herd and it's just alone? What if the target gets eaten by something else before the imitation can locate it? What if the creature is so weak that it dies in the same location it got infected in before the imitation is even created? What if the target is amphibious or is in the water when it dies? Or if it's in an area like a canyon or a cave where there is no dirt or sand nearby? How are you, as the imitation, gonna bury it if that's not an option? And most of all, what if another creature attacks the imitation and kills the imitation on its way to the target before it can kill the infected target? The way this plant works is just the most inconvenient and roundabout way to be a parasite that it just seems so unnecessarily stupid to me. There isn't really much else to say about the plot outside of what I've talked about already. The story more so develops through the interactions between the characters, and the setting simply exists to tie those interactions into the sci-fi theme of the show. I promise you that if this took place in a deadly rainforest or a desert on Earth, it would not change much so long as the key interactions still take place. There are a few things I didn't quite understand in the sense that it lacked consistency. Again, those things mainly falling under the umbrella of they survived this, but also just some in-universe things that kind of annoy me. One of those being Cayman always falling off a high ledge and the Hollow saving him. They try to make it a big deal that Cayman was gonna die due to his fall, and while the shock value almost works for the first time, kinda, doing it again and again makes it seem predictable because now we know that the Hollow has telekinesis and therefore will always be able to stop Cayman from falling. Overall, I give the story and plot a 3.5 out of 5. Rewatchability is Scavengers Reign. Worth rewatching. I would say it's worth another go. While you won't get any new perspective or intricate plot details, you can focus more on the way the planet behaves and put the main story in the back of your mind, while observing why each interaction that the characters have with the native life is of some importance. Most of the shock factor comes from the initial viewing of not knowing what to expect with all the different animals, but now that you can put that past you in the rewatch, you can see more of the mechanism showcased in Scavengers Reign. Is it a show that I would recommend to just anyone? I would very much recommend the show to some of the guys in my department store job because we share things like this with each other all the time, especially when we gotta work really late hours and there's nothing else to do but watch really weird shows on TV. If you like the movie The Martian, I feel like you would enjoy the show a lot. That being said, rewatchability and recommendability, I would give a 3.75 out of 5. And lastly, the finale. A finale can either make or break your piece of media, and the taste it leaves in the mouth of the audience depends on how well it was able to stick the landing. So, how does the ending of Scavengers Reign hold up in my opinion? The ending of Scavengers Reign is the crew not leaving the planet, Chris getting away on the escape shuttle Ozzy was hoping to use to get the crew back to civilization, and everyone building a new life for themselves on planet Vesta with no possible way to get back home, based on what we've seen so far. This ending is actually one that I thought was interesting and enjoyed. Not only did it make sense based on the way the show had been written and progressed so far, but it's a good type of open-ended finale where you can remember how each character was able to survive decently on their own, but now, bringing it all together will help them thrive in their new home. A lot of things on their journeys didn't go the way that they wanted to, so why should the conclusion of the same journey be any different? This ending would have been an easy 4.5 out of 5 for me, if it wasn't for just one thing. And I think I'll take this time to talk about what I said before about the space miners. The 3 of them were not needed for the story to progress. In fact, you could write them out of the story, and not much, if anything, would change. If Chris, Terrence, and Barry never got Ozzy's distress call, here's exactly what would have happened. Ozzy would have made her way to the Demeter, but instead of scaling a mountain, would have taken a longer, more roundabout route to avoid said mountain. Regardless of whether or not the space miners show up, Sam still dies, meaning Ursula needs to go to the Demeter alone. the Hollow still shows up first before anyone else, regardless of whether or not the space miners show up. When Ursula is trying to wake up the crew, the Hollow would still destroy the key components, thus leaving the only option being to open the hatches manually. Ozzy would have arrived a bit later at some time, but due to the damage caused by the Hollow, it would have made leaving the planet a non-option, because we saw the Hollow much earlier destroy the space miner's spaceship, so what's really stopping the Hollow from doing the same as it does here? Levi shows up to save Ozzy, and the Hollow is defeated. Again, all things that would have happened regardless of whether or not the mining trio showed up. In fact, the only real difference I see is that with Chris out of the picture, she wouldn't have been able to take any of their cargo, meaning that the crew of the Demeter has more supplies to work with now that they're stranded on planet Vesta if the space miners never showed up. And I guess it just makes Chris's character all the more infuriating to me, because while I do like seeing the hero come so far only to fall short, it's why Friday Night Lights is one of my favorite movies of all time. It feels like the experience is a bit cheapened when, regardless of if Chris was around or not, the end result is still the same. It doesn't totally ruin the ending in my opinion, but it is enough to make me wonder what was even the point of having those characters just to instantly kill one of them and then make the remaining two have no true bearing on the story whatsoever. The finale gets a 4 out of 5 for me. It's still pretty good despite its minor flaws. All of these scores together give Scavengers Reign a final average of 3.75 stars out of 5. This show was a fun change of pace compared to the more recent stuff I covered, and it was an excellent suggestion from Dohab, this person right here. I'm super sorry for butchering your name, but I am grateful for your recommendation for this show. Apparently, this isn't even the real ending, as the writers had another 2 seasons already mapped out, but HBO Max decided to go in a different direction and ended Scavengers Reign prematurely. You see, this is why we can't have nice things. I got a new editing software that I used in my Mean Girls video, and I will be using this software for the foreseeable future because it's just so much better. I also post on a second channel now where I do scary stories and have a podcast with those same stories on Spotify. The link to both of those will be in the description down below. I've had an idea for a particular video for over a year, and if you enjoy anime, mysteries, mafia, and mayhem, then the next episode of Medianalysis is for you. And if you think you can guess what that next episode is going to be, leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to give you a shout out in my next video if you get it right. So subscribe for that and tune in so that way you don't miss it. If you want to see my last video, click here. And if you want to listen to more of my voice, for some reason, you can watch this playlist right here. However, that's where I'm going to leave off for now. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. And a big thank you to all 1,346 people who bought tickets to the Inviso show. Tell me what you thought about this video and what you want to see me talk about next time. But until that next time arrives, I'm Inviso, and that's all for my spill. Like, comment, hit subscribe. You'll never know when, but I'll see you next time.